You love me more than Daddy does, Uncle Robert. I stopped breathing. The phone trembled in my hand, and that small child's voice cut straight through my heart. This wasn't a joke. This was Toby, Jeffrey Blake's 4-year-old son, calling me at 2 in the morning. "Toby, sweetheart, you shouldn't say things like that," I said softly, but my voice lacked the confidence it should have carried. Because the truth was, Jeffrey Blake never made time for his son. He was always in meetings, on business trips, or locked away in his glass office. And me, I was just a junior graphic designer who occasionally saw Toby playing with toys in the lobby while Jeffrey talked with his assistant. "He never reads me stories, he never plays with me. But you do." Toby's tone was so straightforward, so honest, that tears welled up in my eyes. I never imagined a 4-year-old child would matter this much to me. But now, tonight, after this call, everything felt different. Toby first called me Uncle Robert when I showed him my sketchbook. From that day forward, every time I was in the office, he would run straight to me, and Jeffrey, he only watched from a distance, cold, silent, emotionless. "Toby, kiddo, where's your dad right now?" I asked, trying to sound normal. "He's sleeping." "But I can't sleep, Uncle Robert. I miss you." My heart sank. What was I supposed to do? Tell him to go back to sleep? Or give him what his father could? "Okay, baby. Let me tell you a story. Close your eyes." I told him a short story about dragons and brave little boys. His breathing gradually slowed. Then silence. He had fallen asleep. I put down the phone and buried my face in my hands. This was wrong. All of this, boundaries were being crossed. But Toby needed love. And Jeffrey, he was just a machine, someone who didn't understand emotions. The next morning, when I arrived at the office, Jeffrey was standing in front of my cubicle. His tie was perfectly straight, his jaw tight, and his eyes, they were on fire. "We need to talk. My cabin. Now." My heart started racing. I knew this conversation wasn't going to be easy. I walked toward his office, my mind replaying everything from last night. The way Toby's voice cracked when he said he missed me. The way he fell asleep to my story. The way I felt like I was crossing some invisible line that shouldn't be crossed. Jeffrey's office was on the top floor. All glass walls and minimalist furniture. Cold. Just like him. When I stepped inside, he didn't even look up from his desk. He was typing something on his laptop, his fingers moving with mechanical precision. "Sit," he said without looking at me. I sat down in the leather chair across from him, my palms sweating. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire about to snap. Finally, he closed his laptop and looked at me. His gray eyes were sharp, analytical, like he was dissecting me piece by piece. "I checked Toby's phone this morning," he began, his voice dangerously calm. "Found your number saved under Uncle Robert. Care to explain?" "He must have gotten it from somewhere. I didn't give it to him directly," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's not what I asked." Jeffrey leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "I want to know why my son feels comfortable calling you in the middle of the night instead of waking me up." The accusation hung in the air between us. I could have stayed quiet. I could have apologized and walked away. But something inside me snapped. "Because you're never there," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "When was the last time you read him a bedtime story? When was the last time you asked him about his day? When was the last time you looked at him like he was more important than your next business deal?" Jeffrey's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Hurt? Anger? I couldn't tell. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said quietly. "Don't I?" I leaned forward. "I see him every day, Jeffrey. I see how he lights up when someone pays attention to him. I see how he draws pictures of superheroes because he's waiting for his own hero to come home. And I see you, walking past him like he's invisible." "I provide for him," Jeffrey said, his voice tight. "I give him everything he needs, except yourself." The words hung between us like a sword. Jeffrey stood up abruptly, turning toward the window. His back was to me now, his shoulders tense. "You think it's that simple?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You think I don't want to be there for him? Then why aren't you?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. I could see his reflection in the window, the tight set of his jaw, the way his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "My son called you at 2 in the morning, he finally said, still not turning around. "Do you understand what that means?" It means he trusts you more than he trusts me. His own father. There was pain in his voice now. Raw, unfiltered pain. Jeffrey, get out. I stood up slowly. I'm not trying to replace you. I'm just trying to be there for him when you're not. I said get out. I walked toward the door, my hand on the handle when his voice stopped me. Robert. I turned around. He was still facing the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Don't stop, he said quietly. Don't stop caring about him. I don't know how. Before I could respond, he walked back to his desk and opened his laptop, effectively dismissing me. I left his office, my heart pounding. What just happened? Did Jeffrey Blake, the ice-cold CEO, just admit he didn't know how to care for his own son? The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on work. Every time I tried to design something, my mind went back to that conversation, to the pain in Jeffrey's voice, to the way he said, I don't know how. That evening, I was sitting in my small apartment, staring at my phone. Should I text him? Should I say something? Before I could decide, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please don't stop caring about him. I don't know how. My heart stopped. Jeffrey had texted me. Jeffrey Blake, the man who probably had assistants to send his emails, had personally texted me. I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over. There was something vulnerable about it. Something broken. I typed out a response. I won't. I promise. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Because I needed to understand what I was getting myself into. This wasn't just about Toby anymore. This was about Jeffrey too. And whatever walls he had built around himself, I had just been given permission to start breaking them down. I looked at the text one more time. Then finally hit send. 3 dots appeared immediately. He was typing. Then they disappeared. No response came. I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling of my apartment. What had I just gotten myself into? And why did it feel like my life was about to change forever? 3 days passed without a word from Jeffrey. No follow-up text. No confrontation. Nothing. But something had shifted in the office atmosphere. I could feel it in the way people looked at me, in the hushed conversations that stopped when I walked by. On the 3rd day, I saw Toby in the lobby again. He was sitting on one of the leather couches, swinging his legs, a tablet in his small hands. His nanny was nearby, scrolling through her phone. Uncle Robert. Toby's face lit up when he saw me. I glanced around nervously before walking over. Hey buddy, what are you doing here? Daddy has meetings all day. I'm waiting. His smile faltered slightly. I'm always waiting. Those words hit me harder than they should have. I sat down beside him. Want to see what I'm working on? His eyes brightened immediately. I pulled out my phone and showed him some character sketches I'd been developing for a new project. He gasped at each one, pointing out details I hadn't even noticed myself. You're really good at this, he said seriously, like a tiny art critic. You think so? Yeah, you should make one for me. A superhero that looks like you, I laughed. Like me? I'm not very heroic, Toby. Yes, you are, he said with absolute certainty. You answer my calls when I'm scared. That's what heroes do. My throat tightened. Before I could respond, I felt someone's presence behind me. I turned around. Jeffrey was standing there, his expression unreadable. Toby, go with Nancy. Now. Toby's face fell. He looked at me, then at his father, then slowly slid off the couch. Bye, Uncle Robert. He walked away without waiting for a response. When I entered his office 5 minutes later, he was standing by the window again. Same position, same tension in his shoulders. I told you to stay away from my son, he said without turning around. I was just showing him some drawings. He was alone in the lobby. He's never alone. Nancy is always with him. A nanny isn't a parent. Jeffrey. He spun around, his eyes blazing. And you are? You think spending 10 minutes showing him cartoons makes you qualified to parent my child? That's not what I said. Then what are you saying, Robert? Because from where I'm standing, you're overstepping every boundary I've set. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my anger in check. I'm saying that child is starving for attention, and you're too busy building your empire to notice. You know nothing about my life, Jeffrey said, his voice dangerously low. Then tell me. I stepped closer. Tell me why you keep him at arm's length. Tell me why you look at him like he's going to break if you get too close. Something cracked in Jeffrey's expression. For a moment, I saw past the CEO mask to the man underneath. Someone lost. Someone hurting. Because everyone breaks, he said quietly. Everyone leaves. And I won't let him get attached to people who will abandon him. I'm not going anywhere. That's what they all say. Jeffrey turned back to the window. His mother said the same thing. She promised me forever. Promised Toby forever. And then one day she just left. No note. No explanation. Just gone. The pain in his voice was palpable. I wanted to say something, anything, but words felt inadequate. He was 6 months old, Jeffrey continued. Too young to remember her. But I remember coming home and finding the house empty. I remember calling her phone over and over until it went to voicemail. I remember holding my son and promising myself I'd never let anyone hurt him like that again. So, you hurt him yourself? The words came out harsher than I intended. Jeffrey's head snapped toward me. Excuse me, you heard me. You're so afraid of him getting hurt that you're hurting him yourself. You're teaching him that love means distance. That caring means absence. Get out of my office. No. I stood my ground. Not until you hear this. That little boy worships you. He draws pictures of you as a superhero. He tells me stories about the one time you took him to the park. One time, Jeffrey. And he remembers it like it was the best day of his life. Jeffrey's hands were shaking now. He pressed them flat against his desk. I don't know how to be what he needs, he said, his voice breaking. I don't know how to be soft. How to be present. How to be enough. Then learn. I moved closer. Let me help you. Let me show you that not everyone leaves. And what happens when you do? Jeffrey looked up at me and I saw tears in his eyes. What happens when you realize this isn't what you signed up for? When you meet someone, fall in love, start your own family, you'll leave, and Toby will be destroyed. I won't. You don't know that. Jeffrey slammed his hand on the desk. Nobody knows that. People make promises they can't keep all the time. The office fell silent. We stood there, staring at each other, both breathing hard. I'm not asking you to trust me completely, I said finally. I'm just asking you to give me a chance. Give Toby a chance to have more than just a nanny and a distant father. Jeffrey looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Transfer papers, he said, sliding them across the desk. Brooklyn branch. Better position, better pay. My heart sank. You're sending me away. I'm giving you an out. Before this gets more complicated than it already is. I looked at the papers, then at Jeffrey. What if I don't want an out? Then you're a fool, maybe. I pushed the papers back toward him. But I'm a fool who keeps his promises. Jeffrey stared at the papers, then at me. Something shifted in his expression, confusion, maybe even hope. Why, he asked quietly. Why do you care so much? Because, I said, and I realized the truth as I spoke it. I see myself in him. I know what it's like to feel invisible. And I know what it's like when someone finally sees you. Jeffrey's phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor changed. It's the school, he said, answering immediately. Hello? What? Is he hurt? I'm on my way. He hung up and grabbed his jacket. Toby collapsed during recess. They're taking him to the nurse's office. Without thinking, I moved toward the door. I'm coming with you. Jeffrey didn't argue. We ran to the elevator together. The transfer papers forgotten on his desk. The school nurse's office was small and smelled like antiseptic. Toby was lying on a cot, his face pale, his eyes closed. The nurse stood nearby, checking his temperature. Mr. Blake, she said when we entered. He's okay, just dehydrated and exhausted. When was the last time he had a proper meal? Jeffrey's face went white. I thought Nancy was feeding him. Nancy mentioned he's been refusing food for the past few days. Has something been bothering him? Jeffrey looked lost. I stepped forward. Has he said anything? Any reason why he won't eat? The nurse glanced between us. He keeps asking for someone named Robert. Says he won't eat until Robert comes. My heart broke. I walked over to the cot and knelt beside it. Hey buddy, I'm here. Toby's eyes fluttered open. When he saw me, tears started rolling down his cheeks. Uncle Robert, you came. Of course I came. I brushed his hair back. Why aren't you eating, Toby? Because, he looked past me at Jeffrey, then back at me. Because Daddy gets mad when I talk about you. So, I thought if I didn't eat, he'd have to call you. The silence in that room was deafening. I could feel Jeffrey's presence behind me, could feel the weight of those words settling over all of us. Toby, I said gently. Your dad isn't mad at you. He's just worried. Adults sometimes show worry in funny ways. He told Nancy I can't see you anymore. Toby whispered. He said you're too busy for me. I turned to look at Jeffrey. His face was a mask of pain and guilt. That's not true, I said firmly. Looking back at Toby, I'm never too busy for you. And your dad isn't either. Right, Jeffrey? All eyes turned to Jeffrey. He stood frozen for a moment, then slowly walked over and knelt on the other side of the cot. You're right, son, he said, his voice thick. I'm not too busy. I've been scared. Toby blinked. Scared of what? Scared of losing you. Scared of not being a good dad. Scared of a lot of things. Jeffrey reached out tentatively and took Toby's small hand. But I shouldn't have kept you away from Robert. That was wrong. Toby looked between us, hope dawning in his eyes. Really? I can see Uncle Robert? Yes, Jeffrey said, and I heard the surrender in his voice. You can see him. Toby's face broke into a smile. He sat up and threw his arms around Jeffrey's neck. Jeffrey stiffened for a moment, then slowly wrapped his arms around his son, holding him like he was something precious and fragile. I stood up, giving them space, but Toby reached out and grabbed my hand. Don't go. So I stayed. The three of us in that small nurse's office, something fundamental shifting between us. After the nurse cleared Toby to go home, Jeffrey insisted on carrying him to the car. I walked beside them through the school hallways, past curious teachers and students. Jeffrey didn't seem to care who saw us together. Come to dinner, Jeffrey said when we reached his car. Please. We need to talk. Properly this time. I nodded. Okay. That evening I stood outside Jeffrey's penthouse apartment. My heart hammering. This was different from before. This wasn't just about Toby anymore. This was about Jeffrey and me figuring out what we were becoming. Jeffrey answered the door. And for the first time he wasn't wearing a suit. He was in jeans and a simple sweater, looking younger and more vulnerable. He's sleeping, Jeffrey said quietly. Ate a full meal and crashed immediately. Good. He needed it. We stood in the doorway, an awkward silence between us. Come in, Jeffrey said finally, stepping aside. The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture, everything perfectly arranged. But there were signs of Toby everywhere. Toys in a corner, drawings on the fridge, a child's laughter echoing in the empty spaces. Drink? Jeffrey offered. Sure. He poured us both glasses of wine. And we sat on the balcony, the city lights spread out before us like fallen stars. I owe you an apology, Jeffrey said after a long silence. For the transfer papers. For pushing you away. For everything. You were protecting your son. I understand that. No, you don't. Jeffrey took a sip of wine. I was protecting myself. You were right earlier. I've been hurting Toby because I'm afraid. And that's not fair to him. It's not fair to either of you. Jeffrey, let me finish. He set down his glass. When Melissa left, that's Toby's mother, I was destroyed. Not just because she left me, but because she left him. She looked at our 6-month-old son and decided we weren't worth staying for. That kind of rejection, it changes you. I didn't say anything, just let him talk. I built walls, he continued, around myself, around Toby. I convinced myself that if I didn't let anyone get close, we'd never be hurt again. But I was wrong. I was hurting him more by keeping everyone at a distance. You're a good father, I said. You just forgot how to show it. Jeffrey laughed bitterly. A good father doesn't make his son refuse food just to get attention. A good father doesn't hire nannies to raise his child. A good father admits when he's struggling. I interrupted. A good father asks for help. And a good father shows up, which is exactly what you did today. Jeffrey looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Why are you doing this? He asked. Why do you care so much about a kid who isn't even yours? Because he deserves it, I said simply. And so do you. The vulnerability in Jeffrey's eyes was almost painful to witness. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in. How to trust that you won't leave. Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. Jeffrey reached across the space between us and took my hand. His grip was tight, desperate almost. I'm scared, he admitted. So am I. We sat there for hours, talking about everything. His marriage, his fears, his hopes for Toby. And I told him about my own childhood, about feeling invisible, about understanding what it meant to be seen. As the night deepened, something solidified between us. This wasn't just about helping Jeffrey be a better father. This was about three people finding each other in the darkness and deciding to be family. "Stay," Jeffrey said when it got late. "Toby will want to see you in the morning. And I want you to stay too." I looked at him, this broken, beautiful man who was finally learning to be vulnerable, and made my choice. "Okay. I'll stay." Morning light filtered through the curtains of Jeffrey's guest room where I'd spent the night. The smell of pancakes drifted through the air, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Then I heard it, Toby's laughter echoing from the kitchen. I got dressed quickly and made my way down the hallway. The scene that greeted me was something I'd never expected to witness. Jeffrey, still in his pajamas, was flipping pancakes while Toby sat on the counter, flour dusting his nose as he tried to help mix batter. "Uncle Robert," Toby spotted me first. "Look, Daddy's making breakfast." Jeffrey turned, spatula in hand, looking almost embarrassed. I figured it was time I learned how to do this. "Though I'm not sure they're edible yet." "They look perfect," I said, and I meant it. Not because the pancakes were particularly well made, but because Jeffrey was trying. That effort meant everything. We ate breakfast together. Messy, chaotic, wonderful. Toby told stories about his imaginary dragon friend. Jeffrey actually listened instead of checking his phone, and I felt like I was watching a family being rebuilt piece by piece. After breakfast, Jeffrey had to go into the office for a few hours. "Emergency board meeting," he explained apologetically, "but I'll be back by noon. Would you mind staying with Toby? Nancy's off today." "Of course not." After Jeffrey left, Toby and I spent the morning drawing. He was working on a picture of the three of us, stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "This is our family," he said matter-of-factly. My heart clenched. "Toby, you know I'm not actually your family, right? I'm just your friend." He looked up at me with those wise eyes that seemed too old for a 4-year-old. "But you love us and we love you. That makes you family." How could I argue with that logic? Around noon, Jeffrey returned, but something was wrong. I could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the tight set of his jaw. He forced a smile for Toby, but when our eyes met, I saw worry there. "Toby, why don't you go play in your room for a bit?" Jeffrey said gently. "Uncle Robert and I need to talk about grown-up stuff." Once Toby was gone, Jeffrey's composure crumbled. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "What happened?" I sat beside him. "Melissa's lawyer called during the meeting. They're not just threatening anymore. They're taking action. She's filed paperwork claiming I'm an unfit parent." His voice was hollow. "She's going after custody." The words hit me like ice water. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I work too much, that I leave him with nannies, that I'm not present." Jeffrey's laugh was bitter. "Everything you accused me of is now being used against me in court." "Jeffrey, I didn't mean—" "No, you were right. That's what makes this so unbearable. She's using the truth as a weapon." I took his hand. "Then we show them the truth has changed. That you're changing. In 2 weeks? That's all we have before the preliminary hearing. How do I prove in 2 weeks that I'm suddenly a good father?" "You don't prove it. You show it. Starting now." Over the next 2 weeks I watched Jeffrey transform. He rearranged his entire schedule to be home for dinner every night. He started reading Toby bedtime stories. He attended a parent-teacher conference and actually participated in the conversation. It wasn't perfect. He still struggled with the messiness of parenting, still looked lost when Toby had a tantrum, but he was trying, and I was there for all of it, not as a replacement parent but as support. For both of them. One evening, after Toby had gone to bed, Jeffrey and I were cleaning up from dinner. He was washing dishes, something I'd never imagined him doing, while I dried. "My lawyer wants character witnesses," he said quietly. "People who can testify that I'm a good father. I have my assistant, my housekeeper, Nancy. But he says it would be powerful to have someone outside my employment. Someone who's seen me with Toby in a personal capacity." "You want me to testify?" "I can't ask you to do that. It's not fair. You'd have to take time off work, possibly face aggressive questioning from Melissa's lawyer. She'll try to paint you as someone inappropriate, someone who's overstepped boundaries. She'll make it ugly." "Then let her," I said firmly. "I'll tell them the truth. That you love your son, that you're learning to show it, that you're doing everything you can to be the father he deserves." Jeffrey set down the dish he was holding and turned to face me. In the soft kitchen light, he looked younger, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. "Why are you doing this for us?" His voice was barely a whisper. I dried my hands slowly, choosing my words carefully. "Because that little boy deserves to grow up with his father. Because you deserve a chance to prove you can change. And because," I took a breath, "somewhere along the way, you both became important to me. More important than I ever planned." Jeffrey stepped closer. "Robert, I need to be honest with you about something." "Okay. I'm falling for you." The words came out rushed, like he'd been holding them back for too long. "I know the timing is terrible. I know you came into our lives to help Toby, not to deal with my mess. But I can't keep pretending this is just about my son anymore. When you're here, everything feels less impossible. When you smile at me, I remember what hope feels like. And when I think about you leaving," I kissed him. I didn't plan it, didn't think about it. I just closed the distance between us and pressed my lips to his, cutting off his spiral of words. He froze for half a second, then kissed me back with an intensity that took my breath away. His hands came up to cup my face, gentle despite the desperation I could feel in the way his lips moved against mine. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "I'm falling for you too," I admitted. "Both of you. And it terrifies me because I've never wanted something this much before." Jeffrey's forehead rested against mine. "If we do this, if we try this, it changes everything. Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready since the night Toby called me at 2 in the morning. We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, both of us scared and hopeful in equal measure. Neither of us heard the soft footsteps until a small voice said, "Are you and Uncle Robert going to be boys now?" We sprang apart to find Toby standing in the doorway, clutching his stuffed dragon, looking more curious than upset. Jeffrey recovered first. "Were you spying on us?" I got thirsty. Toby walked past us to the refrigerator, completely unfazed. "But you didn't answer. Are you boyfriend?" Jeffrey looked at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly. "Yeah, buddy," Jeffrey said, kneeling down to Toby's level. "If that's okay with you." Toby considered this seriously. "Does this mean Uncle Robert is staying forever?" "If he wants to," Jeffrey said, his eyes finding mine again. "I want to," I confirmed. Toby grinned. "Good. Because I already drew you in our family picture." He got his water and headed back to bed, leaving Jeffrey and me staring at each other in amazement. "Did that really just happen?" Jeffrey asked. "I think our 4-year-old just gave us permission to date." Jeffrey laughed, a real genuine laugh that I'd rarely heard from him. He's smarter than both of us combined. Without question. That night, after Toby was definitely asleep, Jeffrey walked me to the guest room. At the door, he caught my hand. "Thank you," he said, "for staying, for fighting, for seeing something in me worth saving. You were always worth saving, Jeffrey. You just needed someone to remind you." He kissed me goodnight, soft, sweet, full of promises we were both ready to keep. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. I'd gone from a lonely graphic designer to someone who had a family waiting for him. And the scariest part? I couldn't imagine going back to my old life. This messy, complicated, beautiful, this was where I belonged. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. Sunday night, Jeffrey's lawyer called with news that made my blood run cold. "Melissa's team is bringing in a child psychologist," Jeffrey said after hanging up, his face pale. "They're going to evaluate Toby tomorrow before the hearing. Interview him about his home life, his relationship with me. That's good though, right? Toby will tell them how much better things are now." Jeffrey shook his head. "Child psychologists are trained to look for signs of manipulation, coaching. If Melissa's lawyer even suggests that I've been preparing Toby to say certain things, it could destroy our case." "Have you?" "No. But I've been reading him bedtime stories every night, making breakfast, spending time with him, everything I should have been doing all along. What if they interpret that as me trying to influence him? What if they think I'm only being a good father because of the custody battle?" I moved to where he was standing by the window, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Then we show them documentation. The changes started before Melissa filed. Your assistant can confirm when you started changing your schedule. Nancy can testify about the difference in your parenting. We have evidence that you pushed me to change." Jeffrey turned to face me. "Robert, Melissa's lawyer is going to come after you hard. He's going to paint you as someone who inserted himself into my family inappropriately. someone who's had undue influence over my son. They might even suggest he couldn't finish the sentence, that I have ulterior motives. I finished for him, that I'm trying to replace Toby's mother, that our relationship is somehow harmful to him. Jeffrey's jaw clenched. I won't let them attack you like that. You don't have a choice. This is how these things work. I'd done research over the past 2 weeks, reading everything I could about custody battles. They're going to try to make me look bad to make you look worse. We knew this was coming. What I didn't tell Jeffrey was that Melissa's lawyer had already contacted me. A certified letter had arrived at my apartment 3 days ago, requesting my presence at a deposition. I'd consulted with Jeffrey's lawyer privately, not wanting to add to his stress. The message was clear: my involvement with the Blake family was now under legal scrutiny. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Jeffrey had arranged for Nancy to take Toby to a neutral location where the court-appointed psychologist would conduct the evaluation. We weren't allowed to be present, which made Jeffrey pace the hallway outside the lawyer's office like a caged animal. What if she asks him about Melissa? What if she asks why he calls you Uncle Robert? What if— Jeffrey, breathe. I caught his arm, stopping his pacing. Toby knows the truth. He'll tell it. That's all we can ask for. 3 hours later, we got the call. The psychologist wanted to interview Jeffrey and me. Separately, Jeffrey went first. I sat in the waiting room, watching the clock tick by agonizingly slowly. 45 minutes. An hour. When he finally emerged, he looked drained. Your turn, was all he said. Dr. Morrison was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a notepad that already had several pages filled. She gestured for me to sit. Mr. Carter, I'm going to be direct with you. I've spoken with Toby, with Mr. Blake, and I've reviewed the documentation provided by both parties. Now I need to understand your role in this situation. I'm Jeffrey's friend, and Toby's. You work for Mr. Blake? I work at his company. Yes. But we're not in a direct reporting relationship. When did you first meet Toby? I told her about the lobby, about showing Toby my sketches, about how he'd somehow gotten my number. I told her about the 2 a.m. phone call, about Jeffrey's initial anger, about the gradual way we'd all become intertwined. And your romantic relationship with Mr. Blake. When did that develop? Here it was. The question that could make or break this case. 2 weeks ago, after everything with Melissa started, but my care for Toby existed long before that. I'm not with Jeffrey because of his son. I'm with both of them because they're good people who deserve happiness. Dr. Morrison made notes. Toby speaks very highly of you. He says you make his father smile, that you read him stories about dragons, that you don't get angry when he spills things. My throat tightened. He's a special kid. He also says he wishes you lived with them all the time, that sometimes he pretends you're his other parent. I didn't know what to say to that. Dr. Morrison watched me carefully. Mr. Carter, I'm going to tell you something off the record. In my 20 years of doing these evaluations, I've seen a lot of parents who fight for custody out of spite, out of revenge, or out of a desire to hurt their ex-partner. I've also seen parents who fight because they genuinely love their children. Mr. Blake is the latter. Relief flooded through me. So you'll recommend he keep custody? I'll recommend what's best for Toby. And right now that appears to be staying with his father. However, she held up a hand. Ms. Warren's lawyer is going to argue that Mr. Blake's recent behavioral changes are temporary, that once the threat of losing custody passes, he'll revert to his old patterns. They're going to use your presence as evidence of instability, suggesting that Toby is being exposed to a new relationship too quickly, that the home environment is in flux. What can we do? Be prepared to answer difficult questions tomorrow. About your intentions, about your relationship timeline, about your long-term plans with this family. She closed her notepad. And Mr. Carter, be honest. Judges can spot coached answers a mile away. If you love these people, show it. But don't pretend your presence hasn't complicated things. Own the complexity. The hearing the next morning was nothing like I'd imagined. Court proceedings moved slowly, with legal jargon and procedural delays. Melissa was there with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man who looked like he enjoyed destroying people on the witness stand. She looked different from her photos, harder, with eyes that assessed Jeffrey like a predator sizing up prey. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs. Jeffrey's lawyer led me through basic questions first, establishing my employment, my relationship with Toby, the timeline of events. Then Melissa's lawyer stood up. Mr. Carter, isn't it true that you inserted yourself into the Blake family's life without any invitation? I answered a phone call from a scared child. A phone call at 2 in the morning. From your boss's son. Didn't that strike you as inappropriate? What struck me as inappropriate was that a 4-year-old was awake and crying at 2 in the morning with no one to comfort him. The lawyer's eyes narrowed. You've been dating Mr. Blake for less than a month, correct? Correct. And in that time you've moved into his home? I haven't moved in. I stay over sometimes to help with Toby. Help. Interesting choice of words. Mr. Carter, are you trying to replace Miss Warren as Toby's parent? No. Toby has a mother. Whether she chooses to be present in his life is up to her, but you're certainly trying to play house with Mr. Blake and his son, aren't you? A young man who saw an opportunity to climb the social ladder by attaching himself to a wealthy CEO and his vulnerable child. Jeffrey's lawyer objected before I could respond, and the judge sustained it, but the damage was done. The implication hung in the air that I was an opportunist, a manipulator, someone with selfish motives. When I was finally dismissed, I felt wrung out. Jeffrey caught my eye from across the courtroom, his expression apologetic and angry in equal measure. The judge called a recess to review all testimonies and documentation. We waited in a conference room, not speaking, barely breathing. When we were called back in, the judge looked directly at Jeffrey. Mr. Blake, I've reviewed Dr. Morrison's evaluation, the testimonies and the evidence provided. While I have concerns about the rapid changes in your household and the introduction of a new romantic partner during ongoing custody proceedings, I'm satisfied that Toby's welfare is your primary concern. Miss Warren's petition for custody change is denied. However, she looked at Melissa. You are granted supervised visitation rights, twice monthly pending successful completion of parenting classes and substance abuse screening. Jeffrey nearly collapsed with relief. I grabbed his arm to steady him. We'd won. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but we'd won. 3 months after the hearing, life had settled into something resembling normalcy, or at least our version of it. Jeffrey still worked long hours sometimes, but now he made it home for dinner most nights. I'd officially moved into the penthouse, my belongings gradually filling the spaces that had once been sterile and empty. Toby had adjusted better than any of us expected. He still called me Uncle Robert, though sometimes it became just Robert, and once memorably he'd slipped and called me his bonus dad. Jeffrey had gone teary-eyed at that. Melissa had shown up for exactly one supervised visit before disappearing again. Her lawyer had called to say she'd moved to California, and that was the last we'd heard. Part of me wondered if she'd ever really wanted custody or if it had just been another way to hurt Jeffrey. Either way, Toby seemed unbothered by her absence. He had everything he needed right here. Tonight was different though. Jeffrey had been acting strange all week. Secretive, nervous, checking his phone constantly. When he'd asked me to dress nicely for dinner without explaining why, I'd assumed it was another work thing. But when we arrived at the restaurant, the same upscale place where Jeffrey had first told me he was falling for me, I knew something bigger was happening. Toby was with us, dressed in a miniature suit that made him look impossibly grown up. He kept giggling and looking between Jeffrey and me like he knew a secret. Okay, what's going on? I asked as we were seated at a private table overlooking the city. Can't I just want to have a nice dinner with my favorite people? Jeffrey's attempt at innocence was terrible. Daddy, you're being weird, Toby announced helpfully. Traitor, Jeffrey muttered, but he was smiling. That smile, the genuine one that had taken months to appear regularly, still made my heart skip. Dinner passed with the easy conversation we'd developed over months of being together. Toby told us about his art class, where he was apparently the best dragon drawer in his age group. Jeffrey talked about a new project at work. I shared a funny story about a disastrous design meeting. It was normal, domestic, perfect. When dessert arrived, I noticed Jeffrey's hand shaking slightly as he reached for his water glass. Robert, he began, then stopped. I'm not good at speeches. You know that about me now. I'm better with contracts and negotiations than feelings and words. Jeffrey, you're scaring me. Toby bounced in his seat. Can I say it, please? You promised I could help. Jeffrey laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Okay, buddy, go ahead. Toby scrambled down from his chair and came to stand next to me. From his pocket he pulled out a small box, not velvet but covered in drawings. dragons and stick figures and hearts. Uncle Robert, Toby said seriously, using his most grown-up voice. Daddy and I want to ask you something important. My heart was hammering now. This couldn't be what I thought it was. We'd only been together a few months. It was too soon, too fast. We want you to be our family. Forever family. Toby opened the box. Inside was a silver ring with 3 small stones, blue, green, and amber. Daddy said blue is for him because it's his favorite color. Green is for me because I like dragons and they're green. And amber is for you because your eyes look like honey when the sun hits them. I couldn't breathe. Tears were already streaming down my face. Jeffrey stood up, coming around the table to kneel beside Toby. I know we're doing this backwards. I know the traditional thing would be to wait longer, to make sure we're absolutely certain. But I am certain, Robert. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Daddy practiced this part a lot, Toby whispered loudly. Jeffrey shot him a look that was pure affection. What I'm trying to say is, you saved us, both of us. You walked into our broken life and somehow made us whole again. You taught me to be present, how to show love, how to be the father Toby deserves. But more than that, you showed me that it's okay to let someone in. That being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's strength. Other diners were starting to notice now. A few people had their phones out. I didn't care. I'm not asking you to marry me, Jeffrey continued. Not yet. I want to do this right, to give us time to keep building what we have. But I am asking you to promise that you're in this for the long haul. That when things get hard, you'll stay. That when Toby has nightmares or I have bad days or life throws its inevitable curveballs, you'll still be there. We're asking you to be our forever person, Toby added, clearly proud of his contribution. I looked between them, this man who'd learned to love again and this child who'd brought us together. My family, not by blood, not by law yet, but by choice. The strongest bond of all. Yes, I managed to say through my tears. Yes to all of it, to forever. To family. To you both. Jeffrey slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd probably measured one of my other rings while I was sleeping. Toby threw himself at me and I caught him, holding him tight. Jeffrey wrapped his arms around both of us and for a moment we just stood there in the middle of the restaurant. The small island eyed in happiness, while people around us applauded. I love you, Jeffrey whispered against my temple. Both of you. My whole world. We love you too, Daddy, Toby said. Right, Uncle Robert. So much, I confirmed. More than all the dragons and all the stories combined. Toby giggled. That's a lot. Later that night, after Toby had finally crashed from the excitement and was tucked into bed, Jeffrey and I stood on the balcony of the penthouse. The city sprawled below us, millions of lights representing millions of lives. But up here it was just us. Are you sure about this? I asked quietly. It's not too fast? Jeffrey pulled me close. I spent years being unsure. Years second-guessing every decision, every feeling. But you, Toby, this family we're building? That's the only thing I've ever been unsure about. I looked at the ring on my finger, at the 3 stones representing the 3 of us. Your son is pretty wise, you know. He gets it from his Uncle Robert. I thought he got it from his dad. We'll call it a joint effort. Jeffrey kissed my forehead. Thank you for answering that phone call, for not hanging up, for seeing past the walls I'd built, for choosing us. Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with your heart and your son, for showing me what family really means. We stood there as the city lights twinkled below. 2 broken people who'd somehow found exactly what they needed in each other. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would still be challenges ahead, still struggles and doubts and difficult days. But we'd face them together, all 3 of us, forever.